All right, welcome to our session on the Postsecondary Data Partnership and how having access to these dashboards can support your institution in having a strong data culture, including a culture of inquiry and evidence. I'm Laurie Haycock. I am the Senior Advisor for Data and Analytics at Achieving the Dream. And joining me today are Dr. Bobby Fry, who's one of our talented strategic data and technology coaches, Jake Kabari, who's the Dean of Institutional Effectiveness at Moreno Valley College, and Ken McVeary and Dr. Lisa Stick, who are Senior Specialists for Data Partnerships at the National Student Clearinghouse. This is actually a two-part session. This is part one. So we're going to socialize you to the PDP and kind of the why for it, how it was formed, how it can answer the call for better data. As you have questions, we encourage you to go ahead and use the chat, put a Q in front of it, and we'll try to answer them in real time. But if not, we'll allow Q&A at the end of this presentation. So the learning outcomes for today are to, why was the PDP formed? How you can actually use the dashboards for the PDP to take an intersectional approach to looking at data, which can really help you advance your commitment to examining racial equity. Share how you can use the PDP data to support your data culture, and see the value in having like sense-making conversations with asking the why behind the data, right? Because the data don't answer questions, they pose questions. And then we're going to share some resources for you to learn more. And then in part two, we're going to go a little deeper and actually engage you in a sense-making session. So you don't have to attend both parts. We encourage you to. But this first part, we'll be doing more socialization to the PDP itself. So before we jump in, we just kind of want to do some level setting and do a poll on who's in our audience and what's your current status regarding the Post-Secondary Data Partnership. We're gathering information. We've signed our contract, but we haven't submitted data yet. We've submitted data. We're still waiting for our dashboards, or we have our dashboards. All right, so we've got like, does anybody have dashboards back yet? Doesn't look like it. So we've got a mix of folks who are gathering information and some who've joined and are in the process of preparing to submit their data. This presentation will be relevant for all of you. We wanted to just do that level setting up front. And we do have some of the facilitators who work at institutions that have their dashboards and can weigh in as well. Okay. So Ken, do you want to talk a little bit about who's in the PDP?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Lori, and hello, everyone. Even if you're just information gathering or whether you're already, in process of finishing your paperwork and submitting your data for the PDP, the really exciting thing right now, I find, is how much momentum is currently building around the Post-Secondary Data Partnership. This time last year, we were just shy of like 200 some institutions. And so we have more than doubled, in the past year alone, with the vast majority of them signing on since the summer. And we expect right now, even though we're actually that number, Lori, we already got to update that today, that we know that that's 475, even though we just gave you that slide yesterday. We think by this time next year, we're going to have over 1,000 institutions nationwide. We currently already have 13 state systems. Over 30 of those are historically or Hispanic serving, 14 historically Black colleges and universities, and then over 25 tribals currently signed up. I think that tribal number might actually be updated based on some of the institutions that signed up this week. All that's to say it represents over 5 million current college students, and that essentially, is over 20% of the entire higher education market, and we're already in 48 states plus DC and Puerto Rico as well. So it's just been the floodgates have opened since we started rolling this out to the higher education ecosystem over the past year. And if you look up top there, where it says Postsecondary Data Partnership, right? Emphasis on the word partner. That's because the scaling of adoption is in large part because of our partners nationally. In fact, the PDP was originally built at the behest of these partners that said, hey, Clearinghouse, you all have been used to collecting data for years. Could you build this analytics platform that could serve institutions and serve our industry in a secure sort of data way? And obviously we said yes, and we're guided with an advisory council of experts, and we're constantly getting input from our institutions and our third party as well to make sure that we're really paying attention to the evolving needs of data usage in the higher education space. And so what you sort of have up on your screen right now is a little bit of a snapshot of California. And I'm going to turn it over to Lisa to talk a little bit more in depth about what's going on there.
Hi, everyone. We're talking here, differentiating between on the left hand of the slide is those institutions that are part of the growing inland achievement effort in the San Bernardino Valley area. And you can see there, most of the institutions have already joined or agreed to join, and there's just a couple left that are still considering it. And then on the right side of the slide is other California institutions outside of the growing inland achievement region that have also joined, just to give you a sense of the context in the state of California, who is already participating with the PDP.
In addition to that sort of localized view of adoption, here are a list of our third-party organizations that we consider partners in addition to individual institutions. This list too has nearly doubled in size since this time last year. A couple of accrediting bodies obviously there as well. And so one of the big benefits of this, and I think that Lisa's going to talk to this later, is that institutions can not only submit data to the clearinghouse to receive back the analytics tools of the PDP, but they can also, institutions can grant access to these third parties to see some of their data as well, which oftentimes suffices for various, voluntary or compliance related data reporting. So in many cases for institutions, not only does it help you all with student success effectiveness, but it also creates efficiencies for institutions as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about the culture and transforming the culture to really increase capacity to have a culture of data inquiry and evidence. And so we're starting with a definition from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation graciously supported a lot of the resources and tools that we use in higher education, and the Postsecondary Data Partnership is a piece of that. And so starting with the definition of transformation speaks to the impetus for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to support the funding for the Postsecondary Data Partnership. What is a transforming institution? A transforming institution continually builds its capacity to achieve equitable student outcomes at scale. Again, this was a catalyst for the Postsecondary Data Partnership, and also why the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation got involved in supporting this effort. So some resources that help institutions support transformation. We're going to talk about the Postsecondary Data Partnership today, but there are some other resources that are also available. You'll notice the Institutional Transformation Assessment, or the ITA, is often used as an assessment tool and a framing tool. And then also Achieving the Dreams Institutional Capacity Assessment Tool, known as the ICAT. Institutions often use these assessments to get a sense of where they are and to support their efforts around transformation. So thinking about a culture of evidence and a culture of inquiry, and what are some of the differences between the two. The culture of evidence on the left is defined as how data are used at the institution. So a culture of evidence supports data are used for external accountability, reporting, accreditation, etc. Or data are in the hands of institutional researchers, which really reflects my background. And so I was really close to this and am close to this definition of a culture of evidence. And then data are objective and speak for themselves. Again, we know that data are not objective and speak for themselves. And moving beyond a culture of evidence, it's important to think about creating a culture of inquiry. And the characteristics of a culture of inquiry are that data are for institutional accountability, not just external accountability, and racial equity. And data are in the hands of all practitioners at the institution, not just in the hands of institutional researchers for the purpose of accountability for external reporting and so on. And data are part of a process of critical inquiry, reflection, and ultimately transformational change. So this is an example of the analytics escalator, and looking at the types of data and thinking at your own institution how you use data currently. You want to move from just using data descriptively and looking at descriptive analytics and examining what happened up the escalator to more difficult and more critical pieces of information, such as why did it happen, the diagnostic, known as diagnostic analytics, and then what will happen as you move up the scale of analytic capacity, looking at predictive analytics, and then optimally, how can you make something happen? So as you are reviewing the PDP dashboards and examples of those data today, for example, you might see some trends or some areas of equity gaps in student success and student outcomes. And by making not just predictions about what will happen, which the tool will help you gain some insight there, but also how can you make changes to change those metrics. So thinking about information and these three buckets of descriptive data gives you hindsight, moving up the ladder, insight for predictive data, and then finally foresight. So not only accepting student outcomes and accepting equity gaps, but making some changes and acting on the data.
Thanks, Bobby. And you might have noticed on that chart that as you move up that value escalator, the difficulty moves up. And but having that actionable data is so critical to our work and is one of the key reasons that the PDP was formed. There was a national need in the higher ed space to have better measures for us to be able to make better data informed decisions. And because a lot of times we're funded on enrollment and completion, we have a lot of enrollment and completion data. right? And it's easier to catch because you can track enrollments. We have a daily enrollment report. We freeze it at census, like we're constantly monitoring that data. And we look at three, if you're a community college, 3 and 4 year graduation rates. But what we didn't have a lot of ready access to was data on what happens between these 2 points, right? Progression metrics, efficiency, excessive credits, time to degree, things like that. Being able to disaggregate this data by various student characteristics to identify which students are experiencing inequities and some of these efficiency cost measures, cost per credential, things like that. And then what happens to students after they complete, right? Completion's not the end game. How many are able to get better jobs and earn higher wages, even if and transfer's not an end game, because if you're a community college student who transfers, ultimately you want to be measuring whether they earn their bachelor's degree, but then ultimately they want to end up in the labor market, right? So just moving beyond these 2 points. And a lot of the data that we had access to was lagging indicators, right? If we're looking at data captured here 3 years out, looking at it 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, those students are no longer with us, right? That entering cohort is gone, so there's not much that we can do to support them. So we needed, that data is important, but we needed to move beyond this rear view mirror look to having more actionable data. So the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funded a metrics landscape analysis. They looked at all of the voluntary national state data collectives, and they did a mapping of the metrics to see where there was alignment and where there were gaps. And then developed this field-driven metrics framework, and the PDP was really a solution to be able to scale this. The things highlighted in yellow are things that are currently included in the Postsecondary Data Partnership, but it is an evolving platform. And as Ken shared earlier, there's a lot of institutional and organizational partners who are users who are providing feedback to increase the usability of this tool and platform for our field. Basically, the metrics are grouped into performance, efficiency, and equity, and they represent the student experience from access to progression, completion, and then the goal is to be building out additional outcomes so a lot of these are what we call like momentum metrics: credit accumulation, credit completion, gateway course completion in the first year, which are leading indicators for completion. And these are all the different characteristics that you can disaggregate the data on. So there's some unique ones that we don't often see, like first generation status. So you can really take a holistic approach to disaggregating the data and drilling into those. And then there are benchmarks where you can benchmark on some of these key institutional characteristics. And the nice thing is the clearinghouse is so comprehensive. The more colleges that join the PDP, the stronger the benchmarks, because like you saw, you can benchmark against HSI, HBCUs, and other Carnegie classifications in addition to your state. So the Community College Research Center has done a lot of research on the metrics that are most predictive of a student's 6-year credential completion rate. And there's 13 what they call early momentum metrics. Some focus on the first term, but the majority focus on the first year. And they're really bucketed into these areas: credit momentum, gateway course momentum in terms of gateway English and math, which are college level English and math, persistence momentum, and then program momentum. And one of the key things about the PDP is it gives you access to these early momentum metrics and the ability to disaggregate them, which helps move you up that value escalator because it helps you with your predictions. And so if we can move the lever on those early momentum metrics, it can help us increase completion rates, transfer and baccalaureate rates, and employment rates. So I'm going to turn it, like there's nothing like seeing, right? So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa and she's going to do a demo for you.
Thanks, Lori. Let's just, oh, can I have the slides back for just a minute? Sorry. I think I just wanted to do a couple quick overview pieces here because I think this is important to remember. And I love this. The PDP counts more students because every student counts. So the PDP is a little bit different than other data collection systems like iPads, for example, is probably the one that you're most familiar with, in that we count every new student, whether they're first time or transfer in, full-time or part-time, whether they start in the fall or the spring or the summer term, they're all counted. The PDP is institution type agnostic. We work with institutions across the higher ed ecosystem, which is really powerful. And we focus on all parts of the student journey, from enrollment through progression and completion and transfer. Transfer in particular has a lot of detail that are often difficult for institutions to get information about credentials pre-transfer and post-transfer, transfer rates, lots of information there, as well as the option to connect to reverse transfer. And this really balanced set of metrics that Lori was referring to, not only those traditional outcomes, but really looking at both leading and lagging. So the next slide here is just a reminder of that intersectional approach that Lori was talking about. The power of the PDP is being able to apply multiple filters simultaneously to really look at intersectionality. We know that students are not monoliths. They're not just one characteristic. They're a combination of characteristics, and being able to look at them this way is really powerful for us in planning our interventions. The next slide is kind of a PDP 101. The middle column is most but not all of our dashboards, and then the information on the right is the key performance indicator or KPI that's measured by that dashboard. And then on the left, there's just a few more things to talk to you about. One is fostering that culture of inquiry by democratizing access to data. The PDP is delivered in a server environment that allows you to use password access across your institution to have access to data. So you can decide based on the culture of your institution whether you want all of your managers to have it, if you want your student success teams and your equity teams, and however you want them across your institution, you have the ability to do that. So I am going to transfer here from talking about the PDP to actually showing you what the PDP looks like. So this is our landing page, and you'll see here these broad overview dashboards, the early momentum metrics that we were talking about, and the outcomes over time, where we have benchmarking. They're actually listed here as two separate entrances to two separate dashboards. And so I want to start with our gateway dashboard, which is one of our early momentum metrics. It is measuring the proportion of students that are starting out on the right track by completing both their English and their math required college level course in their first year. And so this is a great dashboard to use just to give you a sense of how our dashboards work. They're divided into 4 quadrants, and the top left here is the framing quadrant, which helps remind you what's being measured by this particular dashboard, and it's typically where any selection options are available to you. The top right is the percent of students who completed their gateway, that threshold there, completing both those courses. You can see here it's been rising. This is a test institution for 2-year institutions, and they're up to 26.5%. The lower left here is the mirror image of that. This is the percent of students not completing their gateway requirements, and it shows you both percentage and the count. Color is count, and the height of the bar is actually the percent of the population that have not completed. And then the bottom right is our big picture visualization. It's showing you what you're already seeing in a combination of the other two visualizations, but it holds that bigger picture view for us. And the way that we operate these dashboards is by using all of these filters. So you can filter by a cohort year or grouping of years. You can filter by the term that the student started their experience with you. You can filter by the credential type that's sought, and this list looks like a 2-year college. The list changes for 4-year institutions, of course. Enrollment type is first time versus transfer in. Attendance is full-time versus part-time. Dual and summer enrollment refers not to current dual enrollment students, but prior dual enrollment students that actually came to your institution after high school graduation to pursue a credential at the college. Age group is divided into 3 groups. Race and ethnicity provides a variety of options. Anywhere you're seeing these boxes, this is a multi-select filter. And I'll show you how that works in a moment. Gender is male, female, or unknown, undisclosed. Pell Grant recipient, yes, no. First generation, yes, no. GPA range is in half-point increments. And then math and English prep are ready or not ready in the subject matter based on your institutional definitions of what constitutes readiness. This last one, gateway status, is unique to this dashboard, and I'll show you that in just a moment. So while filters narrow your focus to a specific subset of the group, dimensions give you the exact same list, but they're broadening your view by giving you a disaggregation of all of those groups. And we'll operate these dashboards in a minute. I just want to show you a couple more things. Subgroup gap analysis is an additional visualization. The details page is a tabular view of the data, and the dashboard guide here is always unique to the dashboard that you're looking at. For those of you that are in multi-college districts, you also would have the ability to see a district level roll-up and to be able to select individual institutions here. And here's your full screen option at the top right. If you're looking at this on a laptop, you'll want to use that. And the download button. You can download these visualizations to an image file, a PDF, PowerPoint, very quickly. They come with your breadcrumb across the bottom that tells you all the filters that you've used and makes it very easy for you to use these to tell your institution's story, whether you're at a meeting or whether you're putting together a report. So let's use this dashboard a little bit to talk about how it can be used to identify gaps and progress in closing those gaps. So we noticed this increase. This test institution has had an increase of about 8% here over the last couple of years in gateway completion rate, which is great. But we can learn a lot more about that just by using our filters and dimensions. So the first one I'm going to use is gateway status, and it's going to disaggregate for us based on what the students are required to take. These are students that need to take English only, math only, or both math and English are required, which is the vast majority of the group. So you get to this status by what's recorded at entry about these students. Maybe they're a transfer student or they took courses as a high school student and they have already completed one of these requirements. Then they would show up as only needing the other that they hadn't completed yet. But let's take a look at these students, the majority of them that need to take both. So I'm going to apply that filter and you'll see our visualizations change again. We're just looking at that group, and that actually shows us here that we doubled our success rate from 11 to 22 when we're just looking at this subgroup. So we really made a difference for these students who needed to take both courses. So let's look at doing some more dimension browsing. Let's look at attendance. Here, when we look at the disaggregation, we can see that full-time students were benefited more than part-time students with this intervention. Both groups were helped. Full-time students saw a bigger increase. Age group. Here we see again, traditional age students helped more significantly by this intervention than older students. Let's look at race and ethnicity, which produces a very colorful line graph. One way to make it a little easier to see is to narrow your focus to your most prevalent populations. So just to show you what that looks like, here we see that Hispanic students are completing at 28% rate, white students at 20, Black students at 15, and Asian students at 7. What I think is most interesting about this particular visualization is it's showing me that before the intervention in 16-17, we had a gap of just about 5% between all of these groups. But now we've opened up gaps between these groups, and there's now a 20 percentage point gap between the group that's doing the least amount of gateway completion and the group that's doing the most gateway completion. We didn't intend to create that gap, but we did somehow with the way that our intervention was rolled out. Let's look at another example, and this is GPA range, where we can see here that above the 2.0 line, the height of the bars is dropping in every GPA grouping. That means more students are completing. And the same is not true for students that are below 2.0. So our students that need support perhaps the most, students that are already struggling, this intervention isn't helping them as much. And let's use the subgroup gap analysis just to look at what that gap looks like. And this visualization always opens blank, sometimes throws people off. It holds the filters that we had applied previously, but you have to select your two values in order for this chart to populate. So here we'll see that the green is 2.0, the orange is 1.0, and the gray bar is the size of the gap between the two groups. So it's a great way to visualize how gaps have changed over time. And we can see here very clearly that the gap that was at 5% or 3.5% has now jumped to 13% in the last couple years, based on the fact that students with a 2.0 GPA or higher had jumped up so much. So this is great information to take back to intervention teams to first celebrate their success, but second to reinvent, to refine these reforms to actually help more students be successful. And next I want to show you outcomes benchmarking. Benchmarking is, if you think of a line divided right down the middle, the left side is your institution and the right side is the institutions that you're benchmarking against. And so I've already done some filtering here to help you be able to see this a little bit better. We are looking at 4-year outcomes for just a couple years, and your results come in 3 columns. You see N, this is students that are no longer enrolled after 4 years. This is not just at my college. This is not enrolled at any institution that reports their enrollment reporting to the clearinghouse, which is over 97% of institutions across the country. The middle column is cohort or my college, and this is 15% still enrolled and 21% that have an associate degree. And the third column, O, stands for other, which is students that started at my institution, but left and went elsewhere. And we can see here that 8% are enrolled at a 4-year, 4% are enrolled at a 2-year. Here's another 5% that have their bachelor's, and another couple percent here that have an associate degree from elsewhere. So our comparison here is based on these filters. So we are currently looking at the state option, but we have HBCU or HSI options. Tribal is within the Carnegie classification, and you have the ability to choose states. You see there's not very many states to choose from here. This is my demo system, so it's loaded with a limited amount of data. We're looking just at 2-year institutions that are public. And I can click here and see the names of the institutions that we're benchmarking against. Obviously, these are not real names, but they would be the actual names of the institution. And you can see the difference in their numbers. So our institution has about 4.7% of students that have transferred and received a bachelor's within 4 years. And our benchmarking institutions have 8%. So that doesn't mean we're necessarily better or worse. We need to think about that in the context of our mission and our program mix and what our graduates do after transfer if they go right to work. But you have the ability to do those comparisons and ask those questions. Okay, so I'm going to take us back to the PowerPoint. Where did I go? I'm going to stop sharing. Sorry. Okay. And Lori, if you'll put the PowerPoint up again, I just have, I wanted to talk to you just quickly about some of the enhancements that are coming in the dashboards. One of the things that I love about the Postsecondary Data Partnership is that we're always evolving to meet the needs of our users. And so there are several things coming this year that we're really excited about. One is a new public-facing dashboard option where institutions can opt in to sharing a stripped-down version of just a few of the dashboards that they can make available to the public via their website, and really to help with that public accountability. We're piloting that right now, and that'll be released for the fall semester. And again, that's an optional feature that institutions can opt into. We're enhancing our benchmarking dashboards. We're expanding our transfer dashboard, and we're adding additional filtering options so that you can filter on things like the size of your institution, the location of your institution, and the level of selectivity and admissions are some of the examples that we're working with. We're also releasing a new financial aid dashboard, and we have a optional file that's about financial aid data. Not very many institutions have done that yet, but I think once there's a financial aid dashboard, we're going to see an increase there, and that dashboard focuses on unmet need. And we're also adding new filters to our enrollment dashboard to explore COVID impacts related to the distance that students travel to campus and in or out of state students. And finally, here we're continuing to work on an exploration with the American Association of Community Colleges with the VFA to merge the power of our two systems to give you an even broader range of metrics to work with.
Okay, so I'm up next here, and I just want to say good afternoon to everyone, and it's great to see everyone on the call today. So we're going to walk through using the PDP data to support your data culture. Next slide, please. So some of the big things I definitely want to touch on here is just how do we move into a data-informed campus culture? And ahead of me here, my colleagues really presented well about some of the highlights of how the PDP actually supports this for us. So in this document that you could review by following this link, a few of these ones, the 5 here, the major ones, is really identifying data champions, strengthening data literacy, establish unified metrics, develop partnerships, and invest time and resources. So what does that all mean, I think, is what we're trying to do here. So I think a good thing from an institutional effectiveness lens here is that typically the IR offices report to those as well. And there's a lot of requests that come in. You know, how are my students doing? where do they go? All those types of questions, and then the different subpopulations that are in special programs as well. So I think a big thing to think about here is that, as presented in front of us, is that when the data is submitted to something like the National Student Clearinghouse, we know that is the nationwide, where they can check that for you, and then you have these comparable groups. So what that allows colleges and regions to do is really move away from just producing reports, but then allowing people to jump into the actual dashboards and get the reports that they need. And then the focus can be switched over to really about getting data across the college, being there for the conversations, and moving forward as a collective group as a college. I think that's a big picture to think about. And then when we put the time and resource into, we could really advance around student success. So next slide, please. So some of the things from a region perspective here that's important is just the access. And I already mentioned the IRIE burden on the last slide. And so go back one, please. Sorry about that. So the big one here to think about for the regions and states is that there is also, it's not just colleges, right? There's programs. When we look at the students of the Inland Empire, for example, and what this, we need to know where the students go, how are they doing, and the other colleges that they attend. And I think what's important here is that having a database like this, we're able to actually connect those dots using that uniformed metric. And what that allows state legislation, partners like the Grown Inland Achievement, is looking at the data and really plan around that for us, and then help us really understand it as well, and provide the guidance of finding resources to where we remove barriers for our students. And I think the next big one too, from a state perspective, is really monitoring the impact of state reforms. I think one of the big—
We should get some. We have some. We need to put them on.
Put that person on mute. Thank you. So I was going to just mention Assembly Bill 705. So one of the biggest ones is the placement of our students in below transfer courses. What we'd be able to do now is, as we know, we don't place students in below transfer. They are in the college math and English. So with that, with being placed in there, we can look at the impact from before and after, and the throughput of students going through those pipelines. So that's a very big one, and that then gives the whole picture for, like stated before, state legislation and outside partners as well. And then I would say our four-year partners are able to dig deeper into this as well. So next slide, please. So for the colleges, a very important part of this is that we now have dashboards that really centralize everything for us in one spot, one submission. I can't stress enough of the reduce of the burden, and then have comparables. So what this then does is, as stated from my colleagues, is that access levels are given to, based on the culture of the college. They're able to then look up comparisons with different colleges. So a good example for us is that at Moreno Valley College, I now can look at and compare to Chaffey College. And that would give something for us to discuss, and quite honestly, increase communication amongst our colleges. I would definitely point that one out, is that we could look at Chaffey, and there could be a certain subpopulation we're looking at. They're showing that they have a greater success rate. So therefore, now we're going to reach out to them and then communicate across and try to figure out how we could implement that at Moreno Valley College. That is, again, for all of us to think about, is that really increased collaboration that can happen with this work. So I just want to emphasize a little bit that then when we remove the silos, individuals also at the college can speak more to each other, remove those silos, and really identify, monitor, and address student access, success, and equity. And the last point too that was brought up here was the benchmark against the peers. That one, from accreditation point of view, we heard Northwest Commission is already part of it. I would imagine that soon our accrediting body, ACCJC, would be right there for community colleges considering something like this, which allows us to compare across statewide and also the nation of peer colleges. So next slide, please. So some of the big parts here for us is really thinking about how we scale guided pathways across the region. And some of the big parts of having real-time actionable data, and that was mentioned before with the leading indicators. So some of those leading indicators that we have is the enrollment as students come in, then do they persist from, from the fall term to the spring term? Another one also is thinking about units completed, units attempted, and then how did they do in that very first semester? What that allows us to do is really, as mentioned in a few slides early on here, is look at how that could show us for those lagging variables that kind of confirm trends, and changing trends become apparent, the large shifts occur. So that is something like the transfers, degrees awarded, and certificates awarded. That's after the fact. So if we're able to look at that first term, look how our students are succeeding, we can then put interventions in if necessary, and remove barriers for our students. And that really shifts us around focusing in on there and then moving forward into the different strategies that we've put in place here by connecting the data to those strategies, and then seeing the lagging variables like degrees, transfers increase. But again, we have to focus on that course success rate that first semester, how much they attempt, and how successful they are with those ones. So next slide, please. So again, here's a couple examples of what has been brought forward with the early momentum mindset and shifting to that. So credit momentum, gateway momentum, and program momentum. And I definitely mentioned this in the last slides, and I just want to really here just kind of emphasize how you might be able to use this at your college, because I think applying it and thinking about the very first intro to this of moving to a data-informed culture and having access. So if you think of different strategies on campus and things like that, a good example would be if we look at the course success rate and we realize that the course success rate is not where it wants to be, and then we do some disaggregation on that data and we look by race, ethnicity, and we identify that our Black African American students are 7 percentage points difference between below the overall rate. What that can do is then spur individuals to get together around that, start a new program. I know at Moreno Valley College, one of the big ones that we are moving forward is a community of practice, where we bring faculty looking at data in their discipline, and then they're allowed to look at curriculum and strategies around how to improve the success rate of those students. That's a good example here of removing those barriers, analyzing that data. And that could be here as well. The first time students enroll, how do they do in that first term, and what strategies what wraparound services are we doing? A good another example of that would be our engagement centers. We would be able to look at our engagement centers with the first time and see how, by program of study, how students are performing, and then figure out what classes they're not doing well in, and then thinking about interventions that we would be able to do to scale across and ensure that the success of all our students. So therefore, I am on to the next and completing this one. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Jake. So Jake brought up some great examples of how to use the dashboards to kind of advance equity and dig into where there might be equity gaps. And the PDP, I don't know how many of you have read the book, Equity Talk to Equity Walk, but I highly recommend it. It's really written for higher ed practitioners, so it's very applicable to our work. And one of the key, there's a chapter on using and communicating data as a tool to advance equity. And in that, it shares that dashboards can be an effective tool for advancing equity, but particularly when we provide the scaffolding that promotes the equity-minded sense-making around that, right? So we need to have, here's the data. Again, the data is not going to answer the question. We need to have those conversations to find out, which students are experiencing inequities, and then have those discussions about why, focusing it on what the institution can control. And so in our next session, our part 2 session that follows this, we're actually going to be digging into one of the dashboards, using an intersectional approach to identify an equity gap, and then giving you a tool and engaging you in an equity sense-making conversation so that you can replicate that back on your campuses. But in summary, the Postsecondary Data Partnership dashboards, benchmarks, and the analysis ready files, right? There's 3 components that you get when you join the PDP, can advance your ability to monitor the impact of your pathways reformed, which are designed to improve the student experience, and allow you to look at performance, efficiency, and equity outcomes. I think a key strength is that ability to use an intersectional approach to disaggregating data so that you can look at the intersection of race, gender, Pell status, first generation status, age, because students bring their whole social identities to their campus. We're serving them holistically, and to really understand and drill into that data, we need to take that intersectional lens. And that helps us identify who is and who is not experiencing inequities, and conduct the qualitative research for insights as to why. And you can take that analysis ready file and triangulate it with your SESI data, with other data that you have at your institution, and do focus groups, what have you, to get that fuller picture. And the PDP can support your culture, your data culture, right? Your culture of inquiry, evidence, and continuous improvement. And one thing I don't know that we mentioned is that the PDP doesn't have a per user fee. So when we talked about democratizing data and having data in the hands of practitioners so that they can make these data informed decisions, you can share the dashboards as broadly as you would like. There is no per user fee like there are with some other packages. And I think that's really important. So you can bring up these dashboards in meetings, right? You can provide these opportunities for these data conversations. So we would love to answer any questions you have in our remaining time. You can just go ahead and put them in the chat.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Great. So how do you triangulate the PDP data sets with, like, how many students are in chemistry major or students in a particular subgroup on campus? You said that there's some triangulation you could do. What's that process look like?
You get a companion analysis ready file. You get 2. You get a, and I'm going to let the clearinghouse go into more depth after I explain this. The student cohort analysis ready file has 1 row per student. So you can actually identify them down to the student unit record level. And then there's a course analysis file that you could drill into to see, like, which of our courses were co-requisites, which of our courses were 8-week terms, and things like that. But Lisa and Ken, I'll let you, or Bobby, provide more information on the analysis ready file.
Right. I think the big difference between these 2 tools is that the dashboards are aggregated data, but the analysis ready file is student identified data. So you're able to go in, and there are additional fields in the analysis ready files that you might not have seen in the dashboards. So one of them is the program zip code. So you're able to go in and do that analysis on students and the majors that they're in, and absolutely, and add this to other data sets that you might hold about students, or just use this dashboard or this analysis ready file to do additional analysis to make sense of what you're seeing for your institution.
And the data ready files, those are Excel files, or they have a dashboard attached to them too?
No, they're delivered to you as a CSV file.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course.
Any other questions?
This is Wendy McEwen from Riverside Community College District. So my office has been the one that submitted the data for all 3 colleges in our district, but we're actually using it as well to mirror an internal dashboards. So, you know, we made a conscious decision to make sure that the Guided Pathways cohort internal Power BI dashboards and reporting that we're using also is matching the data. Well, that was the beginning, and then we submitted that data to the National Student Clearinghouse as well. To give us additional insight into what the students are doing. But we have both an internal and an external component of this, and we're hoping that we can use it very effectively.
Great,
That's
thank
great,
you for
Wendy.
sharing.
And congrats on getting your data submitted.
That's the other piece. It's a process. So,
Oh,
yay!
we should have mentioned that for those of you who might be Ellucian clients, so Ellucian Colleague or Ellucian Banner, there is a new API that supports the data submission, your first, the data submission process, because the first data submission can be a bit of a lift. So if you'd like more information on that, we're happy to provide that.
And that's solution if you are SQL, not Unity. I think.
Thanks, Wendy.
I have another question. It's Carlos. So Jake, what's your role at Moreno Valley?
I am the Dean of Institutional Effectiveness.
Mm-hmm. And are you planning on rolling out PD for faculty and department chairs with respect to PD, and or what are you thinking about that?
In terms of reading the dashboards, was that where the questions?
Yes.
Towards?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. So things that we already have in place for like our program review, we do the same thing, which is Wendy mentioned our internal dashboards. So we would do the same kind of thing of just working through, understanding, how to kind of, I would say what Lisa just did, right? A kind of a quick video like that would be one spot, obviously, that is up on our web pages. We have a program review training one as well. So I think that would help, that part. And then the other one is obviously, like I mentioned, some of the work that's on campus. When we're talking about faculty looking at it and looking at their course success rate, we want to be able to have them also understand how they pull in there and use those same dashboards and move forward. So that way in the future, right, when you put that in place, they're able then to go get the report themselves. It's not the reactive approach of waiting for them to, send an email or submit a research request where we have to fill it out real quick and turn over. They're able to jump in there already. So we would provide those same type of resources to them as these are rolled out.
Thank you.
Yep. And Wendy, feel free to answer for your college as well. I know I threw you in there on that one a little bit, but we do that at Moreno Valley, and I know you do it there.
No, we're good. We just sent out the Guided Pathways cohort-based, a month ago, and are getting really, really good feedback, our internal one. So we're really excited to be able to have access to this one as well, because you guys will be able to plug in even more student behavior, because we know our students swirl a lot. So we're excited about that.
And I will say this, from my perspective of just being in this field, I think, Carlos, just to circle back a little bit on some of your questions you asked, I will say from a burden perspective, I understand the first submission, Wendy stepped up big time for our district and got the work done. With that said, I'm thinking about all the other reports we do at our college where we're trying to match data files and use the National Student Clearinghouse data sets, right? We're submitting, then bringing it back. We don't have to do that anymore, right? With something like this, you submit it once, and that's reducing that burden. So it's something else to think about for offices, that it's more quick in the hands, real-time action versus waiting until everything occurs later.
Mhm.
I also just wanted to mention, as we're closing here, we have a brand new set of videos on our website. So Ken posted our website, studentclearinghouse.org/colleges/PDP. But if you're looking for additional resources to help train staff, there are dashboard videos for all the dashboards with use case examples for how to use it, and they're really great. So they're at the bottom of the web page under tutorials.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you'll join us for part 2.
Thanks, you guys. See you in a few minutes.